G'day and welcome to the Build Me a Brewery podcast, episode 5. And if you haven't already, please make sure you have a listen to the introductory episode, which will give you a bit more insight into the main goals and content we'll be covering throughout the podcast series. And make sure you listen to our earlier episodes so you can become more progressively informed as the series develops. And also, please like our Facebook page, simply Build Me a Brewery, and visit our website, www.buildmeabrewery.com.au, and subscribe to our mailing list. Now, just on the website, you might be wondering that we still only have our landing page up, and we are getting close to launching the full website with some great content to complement the podcast. So we are expecting to go live with it probably the first week of the new year. Continuing with the Meet The Brewer Series, today's episode I sit down with co-founder Glenn Wignall from the Grifter Brewing Company in Marrickville. Now, Glenn and co-founders Matt King and Trent Evans, they began their journey into the craft brewery scene by bouncing around the inner west doing Gypsy brewing and fine-tuning their recipes and finding a temporary haven with their own tank space at the Young Henry's Brewery in Newtown when they were just launching back in 2012. Now, they built a very solid brand during their Gypsy days and a loyal following, and they took the opportunity to purchase Young Henry's Brewhouse equipment a couple of years later, holding it in storage for some time until they finally left the Young Henry's nest and finding their own physical premises and setting down some roots in the Marrickville area. Now, not to play parent having a favourite child, but these guys have inspired me in my own homebrewing days, having spoken with Glenn in the past about how to brew a clone of their New World Hops Pilsner, which is a bloody great beer, as well as other hop favourites such as their Pale Ale and Oatmeal Stout, all collecting awards and champion trophies throughout the years for these beers. Glenn, he offers some great advice regarding equipment sourcing, Gypsy brewing, as well as thoughts on a topic that actually hasn't been spoken a lot about so far, and that is the importance of safety within a brewery and considerations for aspiring brewery owners around meeting Australian standards with their equipment and ensuring a safe workplace for your employees and customers. I'd also like to mention that some of you are most likely aware of some obvious audio quality issues with some of the episodes to date, so please forgive us for this. As you know, the Meet the Brewer series has involved me heading out to visit these breweries in the middle of their tap rooms and busy brew houses and background noise such as forklifts, compressors, and just general shit banging in the background. It's become a bit of a nightmare to clean up in post-production. However, I am learning and gradually getting better with the post-production side, but my main aim is to make sure I'm bringing quality information and content for you guys, and the audio quality does get better as the episodes follow, so please be patient with us. I'd also like to give a shout out to a good friend of the show, Joel Hamilton Foster, who has been kind enough to reach out a number of times to share some great tips and advice on how to get the audio quality to a better level for all you guys, so thanks again, Joel. And just an FYI, on today's episode, if you are a Pink Floyd fan, you're in for a real treat, as the Grifter guys had a good mix blaring in the background during my chat with Glenn, and please make sure you complain to Sydney Airport for flying their shitty planes over the top of us while recording. Other than that, let's kick on. I do hope you all enjoy my chat with Glenn from Grifter Brewing Company. Welcome, Glenn, to the Build Me Brewery podcast. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, that's fine, mate. And we're at your brewery here in Marrickville. It's quite a sight. I actually really enjoyed the decor and the exposed brick and all the different decal on the walls. I guess I've been very excited to get you on the podcast. You've been sort of not to play favourites with breweries. Your beers have actually inspired me in my home brewing days. I brew in your Pilsner and Pale Ales, and we've spoken off air before in the past about recipes and how I should work my all grain to get it close to your recipes. But so I really want to share your insights and story on how you guys started out, and just to kick things off, are you able to tell us a bit more about yourself, your craft beer roots, and go from there?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the kind words as well, Chris.
No, you're right,
appreciate
mate.
So my sort of beer journey started when I moved over from New Zealand in 2005. When I got off the plane, I was quickly keen to check out the beers and what was on offer. And back then there wasn't a lot on offer, as you could probably remember.
Yep.
I did go to the bottle store and basically tried every beer that was on the shelf, and there was probably only 6 or so at the local down the road. But I really fell in love with Cooper's, especially the Pale Ale at the time, and that was basically my go-to beer for a few years there. And I guess just like look, you can tell there's something different about this beer straight away. There's stuff floating around and that's a bit unusual, so that sort of sparked my interest about beer and what makes certain beers different to others. And then it really sort of started when a couple of friends of mine bought me one of those homebrew kits, because Coopers, I don't know, they probably still do, but do those homebrew kits that you buy in the supermarket. So,
yeah, that's I think a gateway for nearly every home brewer.
Yeah,
it's
man.
the kit and kilo.
Yeah, they've definitely sparked a few careers, I'd say, those guys. So yeah, I got into doing those, and then quickly got bored and wanted to move on to the next thing, which was the sort of kit and kilo, so mixing the extract with the fresh grain, and then it just quickly went to all grain brewing. And that was, I just was hooked after that, really.
And what was your first all grain beer that you brewed?
I'm pretty sure it was a pale ale as well,
Yep.
because it was just like it was my probably just a go-to beer style. And then it quickly moved into IPAs. I was just brewing IPAs quite a lot, because they were just IPAs probably weren't as easy to come by as they are now either. A lot of them that I was buying would be shipped over from the States and stuff. I had a good bottle store in Bellevue Hill, which they had mad selection of American stuff, so it was just nice to brew those styles but fresh as well, which was cool. And I think one of the sort of pillars of the beer scene back then was the local tap house in Darlinghurst, so I would spend at least 2 or 3 visits there a week, just because they always had new beers on tap. And there was just a lot going on there. They would have events all the time, and I also started going along to an event they did every 3 months, which is like a homebrew share. And there was a lot of guys there that have breweries now, so like Wayward, Pete was always there, Doc Robinson, who does Doctor's Orders. I'm not sure if that's still going anymore, but he was the man back then. The Shenanigans guys would be there, and just to name a few. So that was a really good thing for me in my brewing, just to kind of get out and meet other people. And basically, like, I think you paid $10 and you got free pizza, and we all just sat around drinking copious amounts of homebrew. And it was like a style kind of thing, so they would choose a style, and then 3 months later everyone would turn up, and it was just sort of a bit of a competition to vote who had the best beer. But
nice.
That was sort of where my brewing interest came from in the background.
Okay. And when you were home brewing, what sort of systems were you brewing on mostly?
Very basic. It was just I had a keg, which I grinded the top off and put some valves on. That was a kettle, and then I just had the esky mash tun situation with the false bottom. I had just glass fermenters, and I had a fridge, which I had the I think it was like the STC 1000. It was like a little temperature control.
The Inkbird, or no?
I don't know. I just remember it being the STC 1000. I could be tripping, but it was temperature controlled, so I just ferment in a fridge. That setup largely is still just sitting in my garage, but doesn't get used. So but that kept me going for a good while. And during that time is when I met my business partner Matt, who is one of the founders, and also my other partner Trent. So I met Trent through skateboarding, because I've been skateboarding for a large part of my life, and he was like, "You got to meet my new flatmate Matt. He's into beer and brewing as well." So Matt became like my homebrew buddy. He would always come over every second week, and we would do homebrews. And then he started coming with me to the brew shares and everything as well. So between the three of us, we made a few beers together.
Excellent. I guess that's how a lot of brewery careers start out, in that home brewing space. I'm amazed to hear those from some other brewery owners that they've never homebrewed in their entire life, and then they get straight in the commercial side. It's quite amazing how they do that. But
I definitely know a few people that have, breweries out there that have gone that route. For me, I'm a bit of a doer, if I have an idea, I'll just want to get to doing it or try to do it hands-on. I'm not going to sort of sit around for months planning something without trying it. I like to test the waters. I was testing the waters just purely for fun at the time, and then as my interest grew, I guess I decided to sort of commit further to it by trying to turn it into a business, and that all kind of came about by chance, and I hate the word organically, but that's just sort of how it happened for us anyway.
Well, that's how you guys have sort of been depicted a bit. You've took your time with the build, and there hasn't, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but there hasn't been a giant spike, maybe just recently in a couple of years, but you've gradually sort of gotten to where you are now. Is that right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. It's been a long rise, I guess, to where we are now. I don't know, that wasn't part of some master plan or anything. It was just sort of how we felt comfortable doing it. We wanted to remain well in control of everything that we were doing, and I guess part of that it took us a little bit longer to get where we wanted to be. Should we get into
I'd like to know a bit more about how you guys started out, and I know that Crafty Pine and Radio Brews News have talked a bit about your story and all that, but for listeners that aren't aware of how you guys came to be, tell us a bit about how you guys started out.
It was a few years into homebrewing and stuff, and Trent, who I didn't mention before, but he's one of the other founder. He has this skateboard company, and we asked me if I'd be keen to do a homebrew, we'd do a homebrew together to give to his stockers, the stores and things that stock his brand as a Christmas gift type thing, which I was it's an amazing idea. So we put out this beer, it was called Portal Pale Ale, and we made this little video that went along with it, and we sent it out to these stores, and they were all banging on about it and how good it was, and I don't know, they just sort of thought that we were making beer now, commercially kind of thing, which wasn't the case. It was just a bit of a one-off, but I guess that kind of sparked the idea that would be fun, that would be rad if that actually turned into a reality. So we kind of had that in the back of our minds, and I suppose we were just looking for opportunities to make that happen if there were any out there, and we got talking to Richard in the lead up to him opening Young Henry's, and we were just sort of inquiring about whether there would be any opportunity to do any contract brewing there, and we didn't really get a solid answer, but we bumped into him again a little while later at a beer club event they used to run, which was sort of where Young Henry's was founded. It was the Roxbury Hotel in Glebe. They used to have this little beer club where people would get together and taste beers and whatnot, and we were down there one night talking to Richard, and we brought it up again, and he was just I'll let you know. So he just sent us an email one day and was we got a bit of space here. This is literally weeks after they had run their first brew through. And he's do you want to come in and throw something down? So we jumped at the opportunity. We didn't really have our stuff in order on the back end, so we just sort of had to come up with a name pretty quick, and I remember my wife helped us register the business and everything, so we sort of just started it all on the fly. That was 2012, I believe, May or June 2012. And it just sort of went from there. First batch of beer again was a pale ale, just keeping it safe, I guess. 12 hectolitres, so probably got 23 or so kegs out of it, and we just hit the streets trying to sell it, and it wasn't easy. Craft beer wasn't as accepted on taps and bars and pubs as it is now. So there was a bit of convincing that came along with it, and I think we knew that, and that's sort of like where the name came from as well. A friend of mine threw the name out as a suggestion when we were trying to come up with names, and we felt that it fit because like a grifter, sort of like a sketchy person that does sleight of hand tricks, kind of that type of vibe, and I guess that's how we felt at the time, that not having any formal brewing qualifications, a couple of guys in their early to mid-20s trying to sling kegs. We're like, man, we're gonna have to pull the wool over a few people's eyes to get our foot in the door. So we sort of decided to tie the name into that, I guess. It's far from that now. But that's just sort of a bit about our history.
Excellent. What would you, I guess, say would be your biggest successes to date?
Probably the biggest success that sticks out in my head to date would be when we won the Champion Porter Stout at the 2018 Indie Awards. Probably.
Okay.
That was a bit of a surprise.
So that's the Omen?
For Omen Oatmeal Stout. And I don't know, it's been a bit of a whirlwind. That's kind of only major success that sticks out right now, but there's been lots of small ones along the way. But
was there a time of when, I mean, probably that moment there when you won that champion medal, but I think I asked the question to Pat at Willie, was there a time where you realised, shit, we've made it, or our beers are widely accepted, or we're in all the bottle shops, or is there a moment like that?
I guess probably just in the last year or so. I don't know, a lot of people come up to us and just like, man, I see your stuff everywhere.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Well, I was sort of like that, wasn't I? I reached out about your beer, your Pilsner, and seeing if I wanted to try brew it like that, and we were talking off air. I'm starting to see your beer in a lot of mainstream bottle shops like BWS, and it's great to see that that's starting to happen.
That's really cool, I guess. No, not I guess, it is really cool. I suppose at the moment, the level of awareness for our brand is at an all-time high, I suppose. So it definitely feels like it's pretty real at the moment, which I'm pretty stoked about.
Just on the core beer range, you've got quite a number. Was it about 6 or 7 that you've actually got in your core beer range currently?
Yeah, there's 6, I would say. So it's obviously Pale, Serpent's Kiss, Pilsner, Pink Galah, Big Sur, West Coast IPA, and the Omen Oatmeal Stout.
And your Pale Ale is the most popular out of that core range, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. It's just always had a good foot in the market, that beer, and continues to do so.
I thought I preferred your Pilsner over the Pale Ale at one stage, but now I seem to be obsessing over your Pale Ale at the moment. So.
I think they've both got their time and place, but if I had to drink one for the rest of my life, it would actually be the Pilsner.
It's got that new world hops twist to it.
Got a soft spot for that beer. It's been tweaked a lot over the last few years, and it took a while to get it to this place where it is now. Just really happy with it.
Excellent. And what sort of, you gave me a bit of a tour earlier of the brew house and all the equipment, but do you want to share some comments about what brew house you're working on, the size, etc.?
So we started out with a 12 hectolitre DME system, which was a 2-vessel brew house, and then we quickly outgrew that. That was a kit that we originally bought second hand from Young Henry's. And then the next setup we got is a 24 hectolitre 4-vessel brew house, which we got direct from China, from a company called Han Yu. We got a pretty good working relationship with the guys there. We've been buying fermenters off them for years, and we felt comfortable to go the brew house route as well. And I guess main difference with this one, obviously, other than being bigger and more vessels, is that it's steam. So we've got a boiler which we got built in Australia, 400 kilowatt boiler. So yeah, that was a decent sized project that we did a couple of years ago. We had 2 brew houses pretty much operating side by side for a minute there while we switched one over to the other. We weren't able to decommission one before we got another one running, so it was a pretty hectic in here for a minute there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But yeah, it was surprisingly smooth, that project, and we're pretty happy with the kit.
And how did you go about the sourcing side? So obviously you had the benefit of brewing on Young Henry's system, and then when they decided to, I think they upgraded to the DME system.
No, they got a
IDD.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, IDD.
I think the same as the Rocks guys.
Yep.
So, and then you purchased that off them, had it in storage for a little while, and then when you found your premises, you installed it, commissioned. But then when you decided to expand and engage with this Chinese supplier, Han Yu, was it?
Han Yu.
How did you go about the sourcing side? How did you agree on that? Because I know a lot of listeners would be interested to know, well, China has got a reputation of being the cheapest, but they've also got a reputation, and maybe not so much now, maybe years in the past, of the quality being questionable. How did you go about making sure, how did you get peace of mind that you knew that you were dealing with a solid manufacturer and that this system was going to last you for many years to come?
Well, it didn't take long, being in the industry before we worked out that the brands that we were used to coming out of America and Canada and things like that were all manufactured for the large part in China anyway. So when we realised that, we felt a bit more comfortable just going direct. But also, word of mouth gets around with brewers and what they're using and stuff, and we had heard that the supplier was making pretty decent stuff. But I mean, that kind of wasn't enough for us. We got in touch, spoke to them about it, and then when we decided to go that route, we just started basic, just with fermenters, do you know what I mean? And we actually went over there as well, so before they got shipped, we went to just suss it out before we paid the final bill and everything. So yeah, we got to have face-to-face with the guys and go tour the factory and all that sort of stuff.
And that's important, isn't it, if you're purchasing from overseas, is actually putting physical eyes on it, or is there other ways that you can do that?
Now we don't really bother with that stuff, because we've been working with them for years.
But I mean, for the ones, people just starting out and not having really that history, business relationship with them. Yeah,
I would think it's a good thing to do, because you might be working with these people for years to come as well as you expand. So it's nice to meet and greet and do all that stuff. So you get a real good feel for the type of people they are and the company they are as well when you're in their backyard, So and I mean, not to mention, it was just a fun, exciting thing to do as well. There's not too many places, to my knowledge, in this country that make products like that. So it was cool, pretty eye-opening.
Excellent.
We went over once to inspect the first lot of fermenters that we got, and this was a hot liquor tank, and then we went over a second time when we got the brew house done too. That was just because it was quite hard to get a grasp of all the pipe work via this 3D CAD drawing. So we thought, let's just go over there, suss out their quality-wise, make sure it's as we asked, and then also just make any fine-tuning adjustments to the pipe work and things, which we did, and that was another good experience. So
excellent. And we've actually got a couple episodes just purely dedicated to the equipment sourcing side, and got a couple of equipment supplier reps on to talk about that process. But it's always interesting to know, especially the breweries that source from overseas. I know Pete from Waywood said he visited 20 plus factories when he was over there before he agreed on one, and so he was very thorough in his. But it's always good to know how someone would go about that, because that is probably my biggest concern, is if I am going to go with someone in, I guess, Asia or China, is one, can I get them on the phone when I've
Yep.
paid for the brew house, because I hear some can go missing once the deal's done.
Yeah.
And two, what's the quality going to be like, and am I going to be able to source parts and all that for it? So, but yeah, it's interesting to get your advice on that. But,
you do hear like horror stories, probably from like multiple industries, I guess. But for us, touch wood, we've had no issues like that.
Yeah,
the guy's very good at communicating. Maybe not so much via email, but they use this app called WeChat. It's kind of like the Chinese equivalent of Facebook kind of thing.
Yep.
It does everything.
Yep.
So yeah, they send files and
nice.
all the communications via that. So I have WeChat as well. I'm pretty much just on text terms with these guys, and they'll send through contracts and things via that.
Well, I might actually, while we're off air, maybe grab the details off you. Might put that in the show notes just for listeners. It's always trying to put in there those little nuggets of wisdom there about where people can help them out in their brewery building journey. But we've spoken in a couple other episodes earlier about the Gypsy and contract brewing model, and probably a lot of listeners can get the idea that this is a model that I'm very interested in pursuing starting out. And you guys started out as Gypsies. Do you want to talk a bit about, or just give the audience a bit of advice on what they should be considering when starting out in that sort of model, and how to jump from Gypsy into actually investing in their own brewery?
Yeah. Well, for us, when we got into this Gypsy brewing model, the most important thing for us was that we got to do the brewing. So, we were equally important as brewing the beer was. It was also just learning the kit and just gaining that knowledge and experience. So that's why it was like the perfect marriage with when we were at Young Henry's, is because they didn't want to do our brewing for us, and that's the way we wanted it. So, I mean, if you look at it from a money perspective, it was probably a pretty expensive way to make beer, because we were getting charged probably the same rate that we could have got it made elsewhere, but without doing the labour. But we wanted to do the labour. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
you wanted to hone in on your brewing skills, because that's eventually going to be, you need those skills when you.
For sure. Yeah. So and they were really good at giving us assistance in the early days on how to use all the tools and whatnot, and then they just sort of left us to it, which was great. So yeah, I would firstly consider that, how are you going to transition from, if you do want to do something of your own later, how are you going to transition from that Gypsy model to doing it yourself? Do you want to be the brewer? Do you know what I mean? Or are you just going to hire?
That's an important question. Yeah,
there are all those sorts of things to consider. For us, we were just hands on from the start, so we wanted to do all that, which was really good. I suppose it is important to know that, our setup, if we were to leave those guys to make our beer, it's safe to say that our beer was not their priority. Do you know what I mean? So it was better for us to take care of it.
Yep.
Because we're trying to make the best beer possible. So when you go to another solely contract brewing facility, that is their top priority, I guess.
Yep.
As well. So
because you've got and a couple of guests before have talked about the difference between Gypsy and contract brewing, because they're very closely linked. I mean, they can be referred as the same thing, but contract brewing can be simple as, like you said, just giving someone a recipe and that brewery just doing it for you. But Gypsy's more of being hands-on, being there on the brew day and recipe design.
Yeah, I haven't really thought exactly about the definitions of each, but yeah, I would say that, throwing a recipe to, say, Tribe or whatever, and they just brew that beer back to back would be more considered contract brewing, versus bouncing around breweries in the West, just slotting into their schedule and brewing a batch here and there when you can, of something different every time or whatever. I'd say that would probably be more considered Gypsy brewing, being a bit more hands-on. But yeah, I could be wrong. I don't know. It's been a while since I've thought of that stuff.
And how important is the marketing branding side of when you're doing the Gypsy brewing? I'd say it's quite important, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was quite a cool, like, new and interesting concept back then when we were doing it to use different people's breweries and bounce around and whatnot. But we did find that when we opened up our own place, the brand really got cemented because it's hard for that story to stick in their head when they don't know where you're from, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, you don't have a base. So I would say, like, what we've done really started when we got our own home, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to say that you can't, like, continue that model and grow with that and build a brand, but I think, the building of the brand part might need to become a more important aspect if that's just what you're going to do.
Yeah, because a lot of people, do associate with local more than ever now, especially with COVID. People are supporting more local. But like you're saying, having a physical premises, having a story, a base is extremely important. And a lot of guests before have said that, the Gypsy contract brewing model isn't really that viable long term. It's a good way to jump off and get into, eventually opening your own brewery, but it shouldn't be something that's sustained long term.
No, I mean, we were definitely, like, not running at a loss by any means when we were doing that.
Yep.
We had, we were paying Matt, like, a wage to run that by himself, while Trent and I just kept on to our other jobs. It didn't really require, 2 or 3 of us doing that. We wouldn't have been able to afford that, put it that way. But, we had Matt running things, and we had, like, a lock-up garage with a cooler in that we built wall to wall. So we did have a bit of a home base, and, like, our beer was, like, out of, Young Henry's or Brewpack or wherever it was brewed, and it was at our, venue or home, I guess you'd call it. So we had a bit of a base, but I think the best part about that model is just really testing the water, because, as you're probably aware, breweries aren't cheap. People might not know if this career or lifestyle is for them, and it's a pretty scary thing to consider, spending potentially your life savings on something that you're just not quite sure about yet. That's why it's good. You know what I mean? Yeah,
no, that is probably the biggest takeaway from this podcast so far, is how bloody expensive it is.
Running a brewery, even a Gypsy brewing company or whatever, it's not just about brewing beer, it's about, like, selling beer, marketing. Like, when I did this, I think the same for Matt as well. It's like, we've never done our own business before, and you quickly learn that there's, like, a lot of other things that you've got to do, and sometimes they aren't that fun either. When you get to a certain point, you can hire people to do those jobs for you, but at the start you kind of have to do everything for yourself, and you might find that this isn't for me. I just wanted to brew beer, and now I'm stuck chasing people for money and whatnot, doing the bass and all this stuff.
And have you stepped away a lot from the business in the last couple of years, or are you?
No, I'm still extremely hands-on, but I guess, like,
maybe not in the brewing process, but more on the back end, is it?
I sort of consider, if someone asks me what I do these days, I sort of consider myself just as a director, really. So I am a director, but I kind of look after the production side, so it's not uncommon to find me with my boots on the canning line or whatever, or doing VDKs and organising stuff with the brew team, or coming up with a new recipe or whatever.
Yeah, nice.
But I don't have time to, like, be a part of the production crew, do you know what I mean? Because I've got other areas of the business to focus on as well. A lot of that's just, like, guiding us to where we want to go next, kind of thing. So planning and that sort of stuff. So I think one thing that we had to learn early on is that you can't do everything, so you need to pick your battles, and you need to get the right people, put the right people in the right place to get everything done the way you want it to.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that Pete from Wayward mentioned is, it needs to come a time where you realise, do I want to be the brewer, or do I want to be the operations manager or CEO running the back end? And so for those at home listening who love the process of brewing beer, which I'm one of them, I guess there needs to be a question they need to ask. Do you want to brew beer as a career, or maybe starting out in your venture of opening a brewery? But there will need to be a time where you either continue the brewing and bring someone in that operation, or maybe one of your business partners needs to take that control of the many different aspects of running a small business. I like my setup at the moment, because I built the brewery, you know what I mean? Not the brand or whatever, but the kit, and that I put it all together. I sourced all the stuff. I got all the tradesmen or whatever. I know how it works, so I can just jump in. If someone's sick or God forbid breaks a leg or whatever, I can jump in and do it, which I really like. I don't want to be removed to the point where I don't know how to use my own tools. Absolutely.
So at the end of the day, I am still very much a part of the brewing, but I'm not getting here at 6 a.m. mashing in every second beer, you know what I mean? So it wouldn't be sustainable for me to be involved at that level.
Oh, well, moving on to lessons learnt, and I've interviewed a few breweries so far, and they've told us about their story starting out, but also sharing what fuck ups they had in the beginning, and what they would do differently with the foresight they have now, and biggest challenges. I know some people have commented about dealing with council and all that, but is there any big things that you can mention to listeners now that they probably wouldn't consider when starting out, that you now know from your experience?
I've heard it be said before, but just finding the appropriate space is extremely important. We looked at a couple of sites earlier in the piece, before we found this one, and just extremely thankful that they didn't work out, because we wouldn't be able to do what we've done in those spaces. It's hard to look that far down the track. I know people probably setting up a brewery might get excited and want to set something up and not really factor in where they're going long term, but you kind of have to really drill into that before you get started, or else you might find yourself hitting the wall a bit earlier than you had expected. So did you you had in your mind of what sort of concept? So the concept that you wanted to run with, was that a brew pub model to begin with, or? We wanted that. Well, I guess you wouldn't really call this a brew pub.
No, absolutely not. But so
we wanted a decent sized production brewery with a tap room. Do you know what I mean? Which is a very common model in Sydney now. I don't think it was as common in other parts of the country, but Sydney, really ran with it for a while there. And now you're starting to see places pop up that are just a bit smaller, have restaurants in them, things like that. You're more of your classic brew pub model. But we definitely wanted this model from the start, but we could have ended up somewhere a lot smaller and been sort of capped, to put it that way, in terms of capacity. So
because you've got quite a lot of room in here, and I can imagine you had that option to expand into it as you grew. Because you've got this hallway of fermenters along here and tanks. I'd imagine that is there much more room that you can expand into?
There's a bit back in the corner there, but not a whole lot. So we're considering our options for the future, but there's still a bit to go in here. But I mean, I kind of didn't even really consider fully that we would get to this point even. So
I guess, and that's a theme of some of the other guests I've interviewed is, they feel maybe they started out too small. and maybe just getting or taking their time, getting a bit more capital behind them, and starting out a bit bigger and then grow into that expansion. Maybe not too much. I mean, like the Rocks guys, Simon Osborne mentioned that they probably got too big. They started out too big too early. Spent a lot of money on equipment they probably didn't need at that point, and they just sort of leveraged themselves a bit too much, and are now sort of gradually growing into it. But finances are going to hold you back from wanting to go big from the very beginning, but maybe just seeing if you can start out bigger if you can.
It doesn't necessarily have to be about equipment though. It's actually just floor space. Do you know what I mean? Because you can put, like we did here, we put a pretty small brew house in the corner, and we started with like 4 or 5 tanks, which was like a couple of 12s and a few 24s, and you just add to that as you go, which is easy. But then obviously it gets to the point where you got so many tanks that your brew house is too small, and then you can just upgrade that. But it's having the space to be able to do that. Like I said, we had 2 brew houses side by side for a minute there because we had the space to do that. If you don't have the space, you're going to have to pull the brew house out to put your new one down, and therefore you're not brewing for several weeks, which could be the end of some people. So it's just having that space to be flexible and to grow. It was a bit of it was modular, do you know what I mean? Like it was able to be upgraded as we went because we had the space to do that. I would say that's highly important. I guess you can try to make the smartest decisions when it comes to equipment in terms of being efficient with your time, do you know what I mean? If you've got stuff that's just slow to work with, it's going to equal more labour, you know what I mean? So you want to, the goal is to get home for dinner if you can. So you want to try to choose the right tools that's going to help you do that.
Yeah, because I hear a lot of people talking about in the beginning there's big 14-hour days that you can be doing, so maybe finding equipment that you can be smarter with, doing double and triple batches, or working around not just having one batch going but having 2 at the same time at certain points of the process.
I mean, we started with the 2-vessel brew house, so we were always double brewing all the time. But we quickly got to the point where doing 4 brews in a day wasn't uncommon, and that was really brutal.
That would be, So what would you average a batch? 4 hours?
From memory, I'd say 4, and then throw another 2 on per brew behind it. Do you know what I mean? So there was days that between 2 of us, Adam and myself, would start at, I think it was 6 in the morning and wrap up about 11 at night. The 2 of us. We used to call it the campaign. Glad those days are over. But I suppose you're going to do what you're going to do with the tools that you have. But if you can, just try to go a little bit bigger at the start.
All right. And you guys had most likely your challenges with council as well.
I've thought about this. It wasn't a overly positive or negative experience in general, and it's a little bit foggy in my memory because it was some time ago. But we went the sort of slow route in terms of getting our approvals in place. We did a CDC for the brewery itself, which was pretty straightforward, and then we did a
I'm sorry, just to cut you off there. CDC. Are you able to tell listeners what that means?
It's a. Hopefully, I can do this justice. It's a complying development certificate, I believe.
Okay, yeah.
So it's basically where we get a town planner to do all our stuff, and I can't recommend that any higher. Just a professional to come in and tell you, like I said before, you can't do everything, right? I know you want to try and save a few bucks at the start, but if I could recommend, dishing out a few G's for this service, I'd highly recommend it. Someone to come in and just tell you what you can and can't do in the space, and what's the best way to go about applying for the consents that you need.
So someone just to guide you through that DA process.
Yeah. So, or he may tell you that you don't need to do a DA. Do you know what I mean? So you can save yourself a whole lot of time and money in in that regard as well. So
and is that starting to become a common thing now? Because I hear that from other breweries saying that the DA process should be irrelevant now. Like, why is there a DA process for opening a brewery if there's so many around now? I think Pete was saying that because there's such a large collection in your area. Why can't the council come up with a way of just making something more formalised, and that if it's in that zoning, why is there a DA process involved?
Yeah, probably not a question for me to answer, but I mean, I think from what I know, it comes back to like the approvals that were in place prior. If you've got a mechanic on the site and you want to change it to a brewery, that's a change of use. So you've got to go through that process.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
A mechanic probably doesn't need the type of drainage or whatever that a brewery does. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So all that stuff needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
A mechanic doesn't have 50 people sitting there drinking beers in the corner, do you know what I mean? And with the noise going out to the neighbours and things like that till 10 o'clock at night. So that's why you have that process in place. So yeah, I don't think you can just create this consent that just blankets and gets away with the need for that process. But I guess back to our journey. So yeah, we did the CDC, which is like a fast-tracked way to sort of get consent. It's where they can prove that it sort of fits into a certain box which has already been approved. So that was how we got the brewery going in a timely manner. For the tasting bar, that was a bit more out of the box. This is considered, the tasting bar for us is considered an industrial retail outlet. So that means that a portion of your industrial space can be used for retail. Our town planner advised us to go about getting the tasting bar approval not through a CDC but through a DA, which takes a bit longer, but that approval was rock solid, so like it can't just be taken back, whereas from what I know, CDCs can be disputed if there's issues in the future. So we decided to go about it that way.
So would you say your experience with council was pretty streamlined? Like there wasn't really anything that really screwed you over, or really, well, gosh, never considered that?
No, not really. I mean, they did hit us with some, conditions at the start which weren't that favourable. Like we opened the bar here and we were only allowed 40 people in here, which was pretty, that limited us for a while. Things might have happened a bit quicker if we'd been able to start with 100 like we do now. But yeah, we decided to just give it a year and just show that we were good operators and not cowboys and whatnot. And we went back and applied for the upgrade, which we got. We just had to throw in an extra set of toilets. I mean, they don't move fast, but I could only imagine how many applications they get coming through their ways. And right at the time, they had that sort of amalgamation of the councils as well, I believe. So that probably factored into how things were slowed down. But no, it was pretty straightforward. And like I said, just having a town planner to lean on was perfect, because we could just call him up and be like, what's going on, and he could hit them up for an update, and he would come back to us, kind of thing, because he has contacts, he knows people there because he works with them all the time. So, but I mean, I've heard horror stories about people having to come up with like flood reports and get some flooding expert in, and that could cost, I can't even tell you. So yeah, everybody's journey is going to be different. That's going to be like the hardest thing for anybody who's opening a brewery to get advice on this, because all depending on where you want to do it, suburb, site, neighbouring buildings, whatnot, it's all going to be a different story. So
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, can't really shed too much light.
And I don't know if we touched on it there in the beginning on lessons learned about what the biggest challenges you had, but with what you know now and the journey that you've been on with Grifter, if you were to start it all over again, what would you do differently?
I'd probably set this place up a little differently, like in terms of the actual layout, just to make it a bit more easy to use. But yeah, like I said, we didn't really realise we were going to get to this size back then. Otherwise, I would probably put more of an emphasis on packaged beer, into, like as in cans, not necessarily bottles, but cans from an earlier.
And that seems to be the changing trend since COVID's come around. Is pubs have been hurt, therefore for a brewery, keg sales hurt.
Yeah.
But bottle shops are packaging is the way to go.
If you sort of asked me this question last year, I would have said the same thing as well, like COVID aside. I think that when we started to put beer in cans, it just like elevated our brand at a much quicker rate than just having taps out there. So we did. We had a pretty strong keg game from like when we started, because that was kind of the main model that was going around, and we managed to secure a bunch of taps like early on. So everything that we could brew was going into keg and being sold. But we just saw a rise in interest as soon as we put beer in cans, and I think I always refer to it as like the drinkable business card. So yeah, just having a tangible product that people can hold in their hand and take away and bring into their own home or space or whatever, just really speaks volumes and gets them to know your brand that much quicker. You can give it to somebody as a gift, you know what I mean? You can't do that so much when you go out to the pub. So I would have done that a lot sooner, but it is what it is.
Yeah, excellent. And I know that without going into exact figures, or I know it can be quite a personal question about the funding, sort of how you guys funded it, but what were the main sort of strategies that you had in your mind starting out with funding the brewery operation? I know you had the Gypsy contract brewing, that was getting a foothold in the market, building a brand and all that, but did you engage local banks, or did you go the traditional bank loan way because you had a brand already, maybe a proven concept? Was it easier to maybe go to a local bank and get a small business loan, or was it family and friends investing? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so we had been contract brewing for quite some time before that, like a good couple of years, and we sort of knew that we wanted to get into our own space, so we did our best to like put aside as much money from that as possible. So whatever, Matt was probably running on a pretty weak wage from what I can remember back then, just to like stack more money, put some more aside to do this project, you know what I mean? So that was one big thing that factored into it. We did approach a bank at one time, and like our accountant felt that we had a pretty good track record on paper, but they weren't interested in loaning to us. Understandable, like looking back now, I guess there's not much. Sales is showing good sales is one thing, but I don't know, it never happened. So we just sort of had to muster the cash up between us, and we had some help from family and stuff. So, so you didn't engage with any like large private equity places, or no? So it was just all pulled together and just go from there. Well, I do have a couple episodes dedicated to the financing and capital raising side. Got a gentleman from Equitice, Johnny Wilkinson, who they were involved in the Endeavour Brewing financing. I think they're one of the first. It's an equity-based crowdfunding platform. So similar to crowdfunding, right? But
people can actually see your campaign online and actually physically put shares into your business that way. Have you heard of any of those sort of models before?
I have, yeah. I'm not too good at all this sort of stuff, but I understand there's a few different models, and I don't really understand exactly how like the ownership of it all works.
Yep.
But it sounds like some people can throw money in and get equity.
Yep.
Other people just get something in return. I don't.
Yeah, well, I'm a little cloudy on it as well, like
Yeah.
yourself. But it does sound like a very interesting thing, and I think the Black Ops guys mentioned it. I don't think it was actually approved or legal in Australia back when they started out, because they did the crowdfunding side of things, where they, you offer merchandise, or maybe a name on a bar stool or on a wall for a certain price point for the crowdfunding campaign. But they pretty much said that the amount of money they were spending on giving back to those people that donated or part of the crowdfunding campaign, they were almost at break even in terms of the money they raised.
That they gave back.
Yeah, so you still got to pay money out to give back to the crowdfund, because people are donating or investing in the crowdfunding campaign for an exchange for some sort of novelty or merchandise or something. So, but they were talking about a model that was on the horizon. I think it had been approved in other countries like the States and Europe, equity-based crowdfunding, where you pretty much put a campaign up online on an online platform, and complete strangers that may have just been following you on Facebook or through some social media channel. So obviously marketing branding is important in this process. They can simply invest a certain amount of money. There might be an allocated number of shares and what those cost of shares would look like, and then complete strangers can invest in your business, completely legal, into a certain allocated amount of equity in your business. So maybe, but I might be speaking out of turn right now, and I guess that's why I'm going to be getting Equitis on to explain that platform. But it's an interesting concept, and like I said, the Endeavour Brewing Company out at the Rocks there, I think they were the first successful brewery to go down that route. So,
yeah, it's wild. I've always when I've thought of that model, I've always thought about just doing my groceries at the supermarket and somebody bumping me in the aisle and being like, "Hey, I invested in your brewery," kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Just like how weird that would be. For
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't know. I would find it strange. Like I'd be always walking around feeling like I owed people something, but I don't know who they are. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I could handle that concept.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm sure there's probably a bit more stricter conditions around it than just any average Joe, but yeah, it is interesting, and that is probably my biggest concern in this pursuit of building a brewery, is where I'm going to get the capital from. I don't want to mortgage the shit out of my house to do it, and I don't want to start out too small, because I think that can be a commercial nightmare, like people like Neil Cameron have said. And but anyway, off that topic, I think we spent enough on that. So Glenn, any other important considerations you'd like to mention about lessons learned or running a brewery?
Probably the safety aspect in regard to equipment was a big one for us. When we first sourced our equipment and got started, we didn't really have much of a clue about what was required, our responsibilities in terms of equipment and how we use it and how that impacts, in terms of our due diligence and whatnot. It was a bit of a grey area for a while, and it turned out that all fermenter tanks, buying fermenters from China and bringing them over and plugging them in is totally doable, but it's actually not how it's supposed to be done.
Yep.
So, and that goes for equipment that you buy off reputable suppliers and whatnot as well. They all have to be registered with WorkSafe, and that requires each vessel to have a design verification and basically a registration certificate to say that that design is fit for use in Australia.
So just making sure it adheres to Australian standards.
Yeah,
right.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Yep.
And I mean, when we sort of found out that was the case, there was a lot of brewers were pretty unaware of the process, so kind of had to go about discovering it for myself, and I since got all the tanks that I bought from China all registered, and when that happens, they need to be inspected in accordance with the standard as well. So whenever we buy new tanks, they come over, and before they get used, we just have a pressure vessel inspector come around and cross the T's and dot the I's, and it gives us a report which says that this vessel is fit to use, and then it just generally has to be inspected once a year, sometimes once every 2 years. And that just ensures that all your bases are covered in terms of any accidents. We've all heard a couple of nightmare stories about explosions and whatnot.
Yeah, I've heard people getting whacked in the face with pressure valves and kegs that they were working on. And
So that's just one of the things that you've got to be aware of if you're going to start a brewery, is that you've got to maintain all your gear and make sure that people are hopefully not going to get hurt while using it, or else you'll be liable.
Yeah, no, and you're probably the first one to actually shed some light on that, because it's probably one at the sort of low end of the priority list for starting a brewery. It's all about have I got enough money?
Yeah.
What sort of beer am I going to brew? Getting the brewery installed, and then safety seems to always be neglected a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, you're totally right. I guess people are excited. They just want to get up and running, and who's got the cheapest gear that I can buy and whatnot. Just if I knew that from the start, things probably would have been a bit different for us in terms of like what we chose to buy. For any up and coming brewers out there, if you're sourcing equipment, ask for registration certificates of all your fermenters, bright tanks.
Okay. Great advice. Yeah.
And that also goes for even things like air compressors. Everything that holds pressure may have to be registered and inspected.
Okay. Well, that's a great takeaway. I'd like to get, I guess, some of your insights about the craft beer industry and where you see the direction of the industry, and maybe talk a bit about beer trends and what you think is going to be the next big thing everyone's drinking, maybe even for this summer season coming up.
Well, obviously this hard seltzer stuff's just seemed to have popped off in the last 3 weeks or so.
I know the Australian are doing a bit in that. They've got a bit of a series on there. Dan gave me a few tastings. So they've got a peach seltzer, a ginger seltzer, and
going for it. So I mean, that's kind of already happening. So I'm not really predicting too much in terms of the future there. But I would say just maybe more of a continuation of what's happening now, with just beers being very drinkable. Like, it used to be that craft brewers were the ones making just crazy stuff all the time and trying to catch people's attention by doing that, and now it's just sort of everybody's making I'm not going to say average beers, like well-made, simple, classic styles with beer.
They're owning it, they're doing it well, and consistently well.
Yeah, exactly. So there's probably a lot of smaller producers that are turning into bigger ones, and they're focusing on their core range, which for a lot of them probably can't be a raspberry sour or something for many reasons. So they're just dialing in those session beers and sort of proving that craft beer is not just about the weird and wacky. It's about just good beer, but people are going to support it because of who makes it and who's bringing it to them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, you can kind of see it from the Furfies and whatnot, those refreshing ales that we just saw another one from the barrel over there. Yeah, just that craft brewers not about just the weird stuff, that we can make anything for anybody, and it's more just about who's behind it and who's making it.
And where do you see the industry as a whole? Are we in the early stages of it? Some brewers have said that we're definitely not at the beginning of it, of the craft beer boom in Australia. But there is a lot more room for new entrants to enter the market for craft beer. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. We're definitely not at the beginning of it. Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I do think there is room for other people to enter, but I do think it's going to be a lot harder to gain traction.
It's just a more competitive landscape.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many taps and shelf space at bottle stores. So, yeah, kind of going back to when we sort of hit the streets, you know, pounding the pavement, trying to get our beers out there, there wasn't many people doing it. It was like, I could count a handful of people, do you know what I mean? So for us to get people's attention was a lot easier. Now to try to come into a bottle store with that same story that we had back then, they're probably just like, I've heard it, you know, several times this week, kind of thing. So I think you've got to have your concept a bit more dialed in. I think we were just kind of winging it at the time. Do you know what I mean? I think it's probably a bit harder to do that these days, and also not having your own home where people can come down and get a feel for your brand firsthand and what you're about and understand where you're coming from. I think that will play a part in it too. But anything can happen. Look at, you know, guys like Mountain Culture, stuff like that. So they're doing really well, and I think that the model probably also factors into it as well. That sort of whole super fresh local kind of thing. I think that's probably your best bet in this day and age, is to like choose an area that doesn't really have a scene like that and build it. You know, if you build it, they will come. I'm not just saying this because like I'm in the West or whatever, but if I was doing it again, I wouldn't set up around here.
No.
You know what I mean?
It's one of the most concentrated places in the country for craft beer, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't mean that you won't be successful if you set up there. It's just that
you've got to have some different service offering or different product offering.
Exactly. So I just think that beer is becoming more regional, the way it used to be before the big guys came in and swallowed them all up. And I think that's where the growth is. Doing this, you know, one of the various craft beer models that exists, but doing it in a space or an area that doesn't have that already. Yeah. And I think, I know there's like places popping up down the south coast and things like that. And I think that's where it's at.
All right. Well, I think we've maybe gone over time, Glenn, but you've been very kind with your time, mate, and some great content there. And but any closing thoughts and advice you'd like to give our listeners about their brewery building journey?
I'd say just don't expect miracles overnight, I guess.
Yep.
It took a long time for us to get where we're at now, but I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned in the journey, so buckle up and good luck. Yeah,
excellent. And anything you'd like to plug while I've got you on air? Any new interesting beers coming out in the market, or any big events coming up for the Grifter?
Us? No, not really. I mean, we've always got new beers coming out about every month, so most of that gets focused on our venue. So best thing to do would be come down, check us out, look for new beers down here, and come by. We're always stoked to see people from all over Sydney or Australia come by for a visit. So,
and if they can't get to your brewery, where can they find your beer at?
We're predominantly Sydney or New South Wales focused.
Yep.
So a lot of the independent bottle stores around inner Sydney, also BWS chain in New South Wales, and also like all the good pubs and bars and restaurants around inner West, CBD, East, stock our beers. So pretty stoked on a lot of our venues, pretty proud of them.
Yeah, and without sounding like favouring again, but if I can recommend to the listeners, they have to try your Pilsner and Pale Ale. I think that if they're new to the craft beer scene or they want to try something different, definitely those two beers were gateways for me.
Awesome. Good to hear, Chris.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Glenn, for coming on the Build Me a Brewery podcast. And I look forward to sharing this with all the guys.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Build Me a Brewery podcast, and I do hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to like, follow, or subscribe across all our social media handles, and if you visit our website, www.buildmeabrewery.com.au, and subscribe to our mailing list, you can get exclusive content such as free ebooks and transcripts on all our podcast episodes. So keep on listening and stay tuned for more episodes of the Build Me a Brewery podcast.